welcome back to my channel, Planty Princess. My name is Ashley. Today's video is going to be on air layering. If you watched my last video, you saw that I air layered my Monstera Obliqua, and I've also done a video air layering, I believe it was my Variegated Monstera Adanaonii. During these two videos, I focused more specifically on propagating these plants rather than kind of explaining and talking about the actual process of air layering. And I had a couple people, say they wanted to hear a little bit more about air layering and learn a little bit more about it. So I figured what a better time to make this video as a follow-up to air layering the Monstera Obliqua. So in front of me I have my laptop because I cannot remember all these facts. So I just want to read a couple things off to you guys, explaining some of the benefits of air layering and how it kind of works. So really there's three ways to air layer. The first way to air layer, actually the first two ways to air layer is by taking a node, or depending on what type of plant you are air layering, an aeroid, you're going to take a node, you're going to need sphagnum moss, you're going to need something to wrap it in like cling wrap, and you're basically going to take that wet sphagnum, wrap it around the node, and secure it in there with that cling wrap. Another way to do that same process, and I'm going to show you that on this Ficus elastica today, is you make a kind of cut into the plant, and then you repeat that same process, wrapping the sphagnum around it and then securing that with the cling wrap. So that's the first way, and as I just mentioned, there's two deviations of that method. And then the second way is by taking a plant stem, such as an aeroid, and maybe placing it on top of another medium, such as soil or something else, that it can then promote roots and dig down into that medium. So those are the different methods of air layering. Now, air layering works by the vascular pipes within the plant. So there's two types of pipes that run through a plant. The first is the Phylum Tissue, which is located just under, for this plant, like the bark, or for this plant, just under, this isn't called bark, but underneath the top layer there of the stem. And this acts as the traveling pipe for the sugars and the minerals and all that stuff that are created during photosynthesis to travel down from the leaves to the lower parts of the plant. This is where the roots get their source of nourishment. So the second pipe that runs through this is the Xylem Tissue. It's much thicker and it's separated from the Phylum Tissue by the cambium layer. This transports water, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and other nutrient minerals from the roots to the leafy parts of the plant. So the second technique I mentioned for this one, by making that cut, this kind of stops those things from traveling down, and that buildup is kind of what helps to promote the roots rather than, putting it towards the leaves. So this kind of helps make that process a little more faster for rooting rather than, cutting it and just letting it sit and take time to root that way. Some advantages of air layering are this technique results in a good sized plant in a matter of weeks rather than taking a longer period of time. So when we make the cut first and then propagate, whether it's in sphagnum, pumice, perlite, soil, water, having that plant sit there takes a longer period of time, rather than air layering it kind of promotes that quicker and also helps it reach that maturity stage a lot faster than if we were just to propagate by cutting the plant and doing it that way. This is because when we air layer, it doesn't take away any energy from the mother plant, and it doesn't take away any energy from the propagating part of the plant. The plant can continue to grow as normal rather than, we make our cut. It's basically like you're starting fresh. The plant has to rebuild itself and kind of, reestablish and all that good stuff, which takes a longer period of time. There's also a minimum disturbance to both parts of the plant little disturbance to the mother plant and little disturbance to the propagation because it's still connected. And basically all we're doing is promoting roots on the stem rather than cutting it, disturbing it. And you know, when you cut a plant, why it roots is because it thinks that it's dying. So that's basically a survival technique that plants, you know, do when propagating. So there is none of that disturbance when you air layer a plant. During propagation, as I mentioned, both the mother plants and the new plant continue to develop. Also, the success rate is higher when using this method and when using a good sized plant. So as for this plant, I was air layering the runners. It is on a good sized plant, but obviously it's runners. There are no leaves on them and stuff like that. So those will start out as baby plants, but even though they are going to be, you know, juvenile forms, they will still develop quicker and establish better because the rooting process is going to happen faster. Now, as for the continued plant growth after I make the cut, you know, that will be as normal, but for the rooting process, it will start to happen a little more quicker than it would if I were just to make the cut, and the success rate will be higher. I've watched a video, I think it was Kaylee Ellen's channel, and she mentioned this plant and talked about the success rate of runner propagations and stuff like that, specifically for this plant, but I'm sure it applies to pretty much all, or a lot of plants that, you know, put off runners. Not every node, and this goes for even stem cuttings too, or leaf cuttings too, not every node is guaranteed to root, but doing it this way definitely makes those chances higher. Again, because it's still attached to the plant, it's not in panic mode, it doesn't think it's dying, it is just simply rooting, and that is it. It still gets all the nutrients, the minerals, all that stuff that's going towards the leaves. It still gets that through the stems and the nodes from the mother plant being able to photosynthesize because I didn't cut it from the plant. Also, again, as I just mentioned, you shorten the juvenile period of the plant. For example, the time required for the plant to attain its maturity stage, its flowering stage, or its fruit bearing stage, depending on what type of plant you are propagating. The newer plant also tends to be stronger and more mature than those propagated by other methods. More rapid and stronger root growth, reducing the period of propagation, and also you save valuable space in attending to, you know, making root trays, propagation stations, all that stuff. You definitely have more space when you propagate this way. I don't know about you, but I have tons of plants, like a lot of plants. I'm probably reaching around 200, if not over by this point. So I need all the space I can get when it comes to buying plants or propagating plants. Air layering makes it so I don't have to take anything off of this and place it elsewhere. I can simply leave it on here until it's ready to be cut. And then of course you still have, you know, you still need space for those plants, but then you don't have all these plants rooting and then need space for your baby plants that you're propagating. So those are just some good benefits. The only disadvantage I found of air layering would be that this technique is initially labor intensive and a little more time consuming. But in reality, it's not like it takes weeks or months for this process to take place or for the initial doing of the propagation. It literally really only takes a few minutes. I know when you're taking a cutting, it's literally snip, pot up. So this does take a few more minutes, but that is the only disadvantage I came across while doing this research. So now that we have all that out of the way, I kind of explained what air layering is, a couple methods to it, some of the benefits, and the one disadvantage of it. Let me show you now how to use one of those processes to air layer this Ficus elastica. So if you didn't see this video and want to know how to air layer a simple aeroid without making any cuts, just simply wrapping it up and letting it be, go ahead and check out my last video. I'll link that up at the top for you guys so you can check that out. But I am going to show you how you make the cut and then do the rest of that same process that you would do for an aeroid on something that's a little more barky or woody. Now for plants like this, you don't need a node to air layer. The where you make the cut, as I talked about that buildup of the sugars and all those minerals and stuff like that, when you make that cut, that will stop traveling to, not all of it, because you still have, you know, some of the stem that's not cut, but the part that is cut will kind of help build those sugars up and stop them from fully traveling to the rest of the plant, and this will help promote the roots because it won't be going towards the leaves. So I like to sterilize when I'm making any cut, but especially because this is going to be an open cut, I think it's definitely beneficial to sterilize your shears or your knife or whatever you're going to be using to make that cut. You're going to pick a spot, and I'm just going to do it right here at the top. I really didn't want to cut too much off of this plant because it's growing and starting to get to a nice size, but for the sake of this video, I'm just going to do a really small propagation here. So I'm going to go below the third leaf, and you're going to take your shears and you're just going to make a little dent. Now you probably want to go maybe like a third of the way into the stem. So you don't want to even go halfway through. You don't want to make anything too big. You literally just need a little cut. And as you can see, this plant specifically puts out that white sap. That's how you know it's alive and healthy. And actually, fun fact, why it's called Ficus elasticus, because this sap is how they used to make rubber. So anyways, now that we have that done, the next steps are as simple as can be. You soak your sphagnum in some water, get it nice and moist. I like to mix some pumice or perlite and also some lava rocks just to help it keep it a little more aerated. This isn't necessary, it's just what I like to do to air layer my plants. Then you just want to squeeze it out. You don't want it to be too wet. Put it towards the edge. That way it's easier to wrap, I find, if it's towards the edge of your cling wrap rather in the middle. And I think I have a little too much. Then we are going to simply take it, and you're going to wrap it right around that cut. Doesn't need to be pretty. The point is just to keep it nice and secure, so that way the sphagnum can stay moist for as long as possible, and also kind of keep that cut covered up so it's able to root. I always then take a piece of tape just to kind of hold that down, and I always try to leave a little space at the top where I'm able to kind of pull it open a bit to put more water in when the sphagnum dries up. So at the top here, like right here, I'll pull this open and use like a little one of those squirty bottles with the really skinny tip. I'll put that in there and just squirt some water in there when it tends to dry up, just so it stays nice and moist. Also, another great tip when propagating any plant really is providing a little extra humidity. Kind of also promotes the process. That would go for this type of, or this method of propagation as well. It just helps promote the roots. You can also use rooting hormones and stuff like that even when you're propagating with this method. It doesn't change. It still helps the root, especially when you have this open cut. I probably myself wouldn't put rooting hormone on a node. I guess you could, but I think really that really works when it's on the inside of the plant. I think it kind of does the same thing as, you know, the buildup of the sugars when you make that cut. I guess that's the, or I think that would be the, you know, way that would help that work. But anyways, that's up to you. I don't think it would hurt the plant. It could only help, I'm sure. So that is how you air layer and some of the benefits of using this method of propagation. I hope you found this video helpful. I hope you are ready and willing to try this method of propagation. If you don't already, I definitely love it. Like I said, especially for my more rare or expensive plants or hard to propagate plants, it keeps that success rate up and makes me feel a little better in hopes that I won't lose the propagation that I'm trying to get. Thank you again for joining me in another video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're interested in the content I provide. And as always, every plant's a princess. Bye!